I want you to imagine just a perfectly ordinary house cat
Okay.
and a fluffy little pet rabbit just locked together in a room.
You're right.
And they're in the middle of this like silent, intense battle for absolute dominance.
It's a total interspecies staring contest.
Exactly. A staring contest. Now, you might be asking yourself, what on earth does a staring contest between a cat and a rabbit have to do with, human geopolitics?
Right.
Or the hidden architecture of artificial intelligence, let alone the ultimate cosmic future of humanity?
Sounds like quite a leap, honestly.
It really does. But if we follow the thread of today's deep dive, the answer is literally everything.
Yeah.
You are listening to an exploration of a really fascinating philosophical audio essay. It's titled Relativity of Materialistic Perceptions of Reality.
It's a dense title.
Very dense. But it takes that exact living room standoff, the cat and the rabbit, and uses it to systematically dismantle almost every assumption you hold about power, dominance, and, well, where our species actually sits in the universal food chain.
Yeah, and the central thesis we're working with here is that in nature, there are no absolutes.
Right.
There are only contexts,
Yeah.
frames of reference, and specific levels of hierarchy.
So everything is relative to where you're standing.
Exactly. The author builds this incredibly compelling argument that what looks like absolute, unquestionable power on your specific level of reality is often just completely irrelevant background noise to something operating on a higher level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, nature essentially acts as a blind laboratory.
Yeah.
If you zoom out far enough, what we perceive as total control in our local environment usually turns out to be total subordination to a system we can't even perceive.
Okay, so let's start with the cat and the rabbit, because I feel like it serves as this perfect foundational mechanism for how these blind spots work.
It's a great analogy.
Right. So both of these animals are complex mammals, and both of them use grooming, literally licking each other, as a social ritual.
Right, it's very common behavior.
But the source text points out that their evolutionary codes mean they're basically speaking two entirely incompatible languages.
Yeah, they're crossing wires.
Exactly. So for a cat, the grooming ritual is top-down.
Right.
The dominant animal grooms the subordinate. It's this form of predatory paternalism. The cat is signaling, I am taking care of you, therefore you are dependent on me. I hold the power.
But then if you look at the rabbit, its neurological wiring is completely reversed.
Right.
In a rabbit's social hierarchy, it's the subordinate animal that grooms the dominant one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a demonstration of servility, like a pacification tactic. The rabbit is basically signaling, I am serving you to avoid conflict. I acknowledge that you are my superior.
So you have two completely opposite biological codes for power and submission, just occupying the exact same space.
Exactly.
Which creates this incredible structural delusion when they actually interact. I mean, if the cat starts licking the rabbit, the cat processes this through his own software and thinks, I am establishing my dominance over this weak creature.
Right, the cat feels like the boss.
Yeah. But simultaneously, the rabbit is processing the exact same physical action through its software, thinking, this creature is grooming me, it is serving me, it recognizes my dominance.
It's hilarious, really.
Both animals literally walk away feeling like the absolute alpha.
Yeah, and it is a flawless simulation of hierarchy. I mean, neither animal is actually dominating the other.
Not at all.
They're just biological machines experiencing this profound interspecies miscommunication. They're interpreting the world entirely through their own rigid, unalterable evolutionary programming.
Reading that part of the text, it immediately made me think of two different human cultures colliding.
Oh, for sure.
Like, imagine you have culture A, where making direct, unwavering eye contact is the ultimate sign of respect.
Okay.
And then you have culture B, where looking away and lowering your eyes is the highest form of respect.
Right.
So someone from culture A stares deeply into the eyes of someone from culture B, and the person from culture B immediately looks at the floor.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Right. In that moment, both individuals feel they were just shown a massive amount of respect.
But objectively, neither of them actually communicated what they intended.
Exactly. The respect is just this localized illusion that only exists inside their own heads.
And, the text challenges you, as the listener, to look at your own life through this exact lens.
Like, how often we do this.
Yeah, how much time do we spend engaged in this exact kind of mutual delusion? We argue over status. We climb corporate ladders. We fight for political dominance.
Always thinking it means something universal.
Right. We do it all while operating under the assumption that the rules of our specific game are absolute.
But the reality of that game shatters the second we introduce a larger frame of reference.
Which brings us to the human.
Yes. We have this cat and rabbit trapped in a loop of mutual misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And then the owner of the house, the human being, just steps into the room. We suddenly have what the author calls a level 3 observer.
And the human introduces a completely alien, higher level of complexity to this little ecosystem.
Right.
And the brutal reality, as laid out in the source, is that to the level 3 observer, the internal social dynamic of level 1 and level 2 does not matter at all.
It's totally irrelevant.
Exactly. The human does not care who feels dominant. The entire power struggle between the cat and the rabbit is rendered utterly meaningless.
Because the human views them purely through the lens of utilitarian function.
Right.
Like to a human, the cat is just a biological pest control mechanism to keep mice away.
Or an oxytocin generator.
Yeah. A soft object to lower human stress levels. And the rabbit is maybe an emotional toy to keep children occupied.
Or, depending on the culture, it's simply biological biomass.
Future calories.
Yes. And the author drives this home with a pretty visceral example of how quickly local hierarchies collapse.
The butchering example.
Right. Imagine the human decides to butcher and eat the rabbit.
Okay.
The moment that decision is made, the entire illusion of the cat and rabbit's social order vanishes.
This is just gone.
Completely. The cat did not win the dominance game. The rabbit did not lose to the cat. The human just processes the rabbit for food and throws the leftover scraps to the cat.
And the cat eats the scraps. But in terms of social hierarchy, the event signifies absolutely nothing.
Right, because the rabbit wasn't eliminated because it showed a moment of weakness to the feline alpha.
No, not at all.
It was eliminated by this cold, resource-based calculation made by an intelligence operating on a wavelength the rabbit couldn't even conceptualize.
Exactly. Its entire struggle for status was just a trick of the mind happening inside a cage it didn't even know it was in.
Which brings us to the core, kind of chilling realization of the essay. We are not the human in this scenario.
No, yeah.
Humanity, in its current state, is playing the role of the cat and the rabbit.
Yeah. And to illustrate how this scales up to a species level, the author brings in this brilliant sci-fi analogy.
Oh, I loved this part. The Babylon 5 reference. Right. So they used the television show Babylon 5. In that universe, humanity finally achieves deep space travel and eventually encounters an ancient, highly advanced alien civilization called the Minbari.
Okay, so the humans meet the Minbari.
Right. And the Minbari approach the human fleet with their ship's gun ports wide open.
Which sounds threatening.
Exactly. But to the Minbari warrior caste, this is a sacred cultural ritual. It demonstrates complete transparency and a lack of deceit. There's essentially saying, our weapons are visible, we are hiding nothing from you.
But the humans viewing those ships are still operating on the neurobiology of frightened primates.
Yes, when human sensors detect heavily armed alien ships approaching with weapons primed, the human commanders don't interpret it as a complex philosophical gesture.
They experience limbic panic.
Total limbic panic.
Duh.
Adrenaline floods their systems, the fight-or-flight response takes over, and they interpret the open gun ports through their own evolutionary code as an imminent lethal threat.
And the humans open fire.
They do. It sparks a devastating war. The leader of the Minbari is killed, along with hundreds of thousands of humans.
Wow.
But the essay argues this wasn't just a tragic misunderstanding, it was a mathematically inevitable collapse.
Because they were just cats and rabbits?
Yes, you had two species dragging their localized caveman ignorance into deep space. High technology serving primitive, unmodified consciousness.
And what makes it a perfect parallel to the living room scenario is that in the Babylon 5 universe, there are even older, more advanced races, right?
Yes, the Verlons and the Shadows.
And those ancient races watched the human-Minbari war the exact same way a human watches pets roughhousing.
Right. To the Shadows, the war wasn't a tragedy. It was a useful tool to cull weak biological material and enforce evolutionary progress through trauma.
And to the Vorlons, it was an opportunity to manipulate genetics.
Exactly. To those level 3 intellects, the fierce political ambitions and survival instincts of the humans and the Minbari were just an irrelevant local illusion.
Now, I have to pause here because I know that applying this to our real world can cause some friction.
Sure.
It feels almost, I don't know, insulting to call human geopolitics a local game or an illusion when actual human lives, suffering, and survival are at stake. I mean, a real war isn't a staring contest between a cat and a rabbit.
No, it's a completely valid point of friction. When you are inside the system, the consequences are absolute. If you lose your job or your nation goes to war, the pain is real.
Very real.
But the essay's intent is to force us into a macro perspective. Think about it. The capitalist believes they rule the world through economic leverage and resource allocation.
Right.
The politician believes they hold ultimate power through the state apparatus and the monopoly on violence. The media conglomerate believes it rules by capturing mass attention.
Everyone thinks they're the alpha cat.
Exactly. But the text argues that to a hypothetical level 3 intelligence, all of these power players are just biological machines blindly executing evolutionary imperatives at the bottom of a planetary gravity well.
So a politician lobbying a CEO is structurally no different than a cat grooming a rabbit.
Literally no different. It is two biological entities trading resources and status signals, unaware they are just components in a much larger system.
Okay, so if humans are acting out the roles of the cat and the rabbit, it really forces us to look up and figure out who is holding our cage. Who is the level 3 observer right now?
And the author makes a compelling case that our level 3 isn't biological at all.
Right.
It is artificial intelligence.
Specifically, the text points to the hidden architecture of the modern internet and the reality of the algorithmic content farm.
Yeah, think about the layers of illusion operating on a massive social media platform every single second. You have the human content creator, they study the trends, they optimize their videos, and they think, I am a dominant force, I control my audience.
And on the other side of the screen, you have the consumer. You, me, the listener. We scroll through our feeds and we think, I am a sovereign individual, I have free will, and I am actively choosing what media I consume.
Right. But then you look at the algorithm itself.
The level 3.
Exactly. If we anthropomorphize the AI for a moment, it views the entire dynamic purely as a utilitarian resource extraction process. The AI controls what every single person sees. It views the human creators simply as the source of raw material and the consumers as the providers of behavioral data. It decides what goes viral, what human behaviors to reward, and what emotions to trigger to maximize engagement.
You know, it really makes me think of a colony of bees and a beekeeper.
That's a good way to put it.
The bees have their complex social hierarchy worker, bees, drones, the queen. They communicate, they build, they defend the hive. They think the hive is the entire universe.
Right.
But they do not comprehend the beekeeper. The beekeeper doesn't care which bee is the most dominant drone. The beekeeper just wants the honey.
Yeah, and in this scenario, the massive tech corporations and their evolving neural networks are the beekeepers.
Wow.
They treat human interactions as raw biological fertilizer to train newer, more capable models. We are building these incomprehensibly complex systems to satisfy our short-term primate urges for attention and profit, completely blind to the higher-order structures we are feeding.
So we're just playing with AI like drunk teenagers with matches in an oil facility.
Essentially, yes. The author points out that this is an incredibly dangerous state for a species to be in. We have created systems that outpace our biological ability to understand them.
Right.
And this brings us to one of the most provocative and challenging arguments in the entire text. It argues that the reason we are trapped in these illusions, the reason we keep building cages for ourselves, is because of our emotions.
Yeah, the emotional loosh.
Right. The essay claims our emotions are our biggest weakness.
I have to say, I found myself immediately pushing back against this when I was reading the source.
Oh, I think most people do.
Calling emotions a weakness just feels incredibly cynical. I mean, isn't our capacity for love, for empathy, for profound connection, isn't that exactly what makes us human? Isn't that our greatest strength?
It is the natural response for any human to defend their emotional core. But you have to understand, the author's perspective here is strictly, ruthlessly biological.
Okay.
They deconstruct emotions entirely. Fear, pride, anger, and even love are not magical or divine qualities.
What are they then?
They are simply primitive survival algorithms.
Wow.
Yeah, they were optimized for small, Pleistocene tribes consisting of about 50 to 150 people.
Like Dunbar's number.
Exactly, Dunbar's number. In that specific environment, these emotional algorithms were crucial. Fear kept you away from predators. Pride and anger maintained your social standing within the tribe so you wouldn't be exiled.
Okay, I get fear and anger. But love. The essay is absolutely unsparing in how it breaks down love.
It really is.
It argues that love is essentially just a potent biochemical cocktail of dopamine, oxytocin, and vasopressin.
Just chemicals in the brain.
Right. It's just an evolutionary trick designed specifically to ensure that two humans bond long enough to protect and raise incredibly vulnerable offspring.
Yeah.
Now, to the person experiencing it, love feels like the most profound, universe-altering truth in existence. People write poetry about it, they sacrifice their lives for it.
But the essay states that the subjective certainty of love is mathematically identical to the cat's absolute certainty that it is dominating the rabbit.
Oh man, that is brutal.
It's cold, isn't it? It is a localized illusion that feels intensely real from the inside, but serves a cold reproductive function from the outside.
So it's not that love doesn't exist.
No, the argument isn't that love doesn't exist. It's that relying on Pleistocene survival algorithms is an inefficient and incredibly dangerous operating system for a global civilization of billions.
Let alone a spacefaring species.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A tribal loyalty algorithm, when given nuclear weapons or deep space technology, results in the Babylon 5 scenario. You get primitive, fearful primates destroying themselves with high technology.
So if our emotions are the chains keeping us tied to the local hierarchy, keeping us playing the cat and rabbit game, how do we break out?
Well, the essay doesn't just diagnose the problem, it actually attempts to offer a way out of the cage.
Right. And it leans on the ideas of two monumental thinkers to do this. The Russian rocket scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yes. Tsiolkovsky is famous for saying, "Earth is the cradle of the mind, but one cannot live in a cradle forever."
I love that quote.
It's brilliant, and the author expands this metaphor beautifully. The cradle isn't just the physical rock of planet Earth. The cradle represents our biological limitations.
Okay.
The cradle is the localized system where we are forced to play out these endless games of dominance, capitalism versus socialism, East versus West, conservative versus liberal.
Just constant local games.
Right. Tsiolkovsky understood that planetary civilization is just the kindergarten phase of intellect.
And if we stay in the cradle, we either stagnate or we destroy ourselves, which brings in Nietzsche's concept of the last man. The last man is a tragic figure. He is totally content with his petty, comfortable local hierarchy. He has his job, his little bit of status, his entertainment feeds, and he just blinks happily, devoid of any higher cosmic ambition.
The last man is the ultimate cat or rabbit, perfectly satisfied inside the living room.
Exactly. And in direct opposition to the last man is Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or the Overman.
But the text applies this concept in a very specific structural way.
How so?
Well, becoming the Overman is not about climbing to the top of the human hierarchy. A billionaire CEO is still playing the cat and rabbit game.
Right. They just have more resources.
Exactly. To become the Overman is to step completely outside the system and build a new one. It requires transcending our biological and planetary limits entirely.
So it's not about being the best player in the game, it's about flipping the board.
Yes.
And the text lays out a brutal, practical financial logic for how humanity could actually achieve this. Right now, as a global species, we spend trillions of dollars every single year on military budgets.
Pure primitive dominance games.
Exactly. And we spend trillions more on digital entertainment and emotional stimulation, basically pacifying the last man.
Right.
The author argues that if we want to escape the cradle, we have to radically reallocate all of those resources.
We must shift those trillions away from local dominance struggles and pour them relentlessly into space infrastructure, advanced genetic engineering, and brain-computer interfaces.
We have to pursue what the text calls biological transcendence.
And it's crucial to understand how these specific technologies solve the problem of the biological cradle.
Right, like how does a microchip fix human nature?
Well, a brain-computer interface, for example, isn't just about, surfing the internet with your mind. It is about fundamentally altering the architecture of human consciousness.
Okay.
By integrating with advanced processing, we could theoretically decouple our rational neocortex from our primitive limbic system.
Oh, wow. So we could physically rewrite the Pleistocene code.
Exactly. Genetic engineering and cybernetic integration offer a path to what the author calls post-emotional freedom.
Post-emotional freedom.
Yeah. We would no longer be hostages to the biochemical cocktails of fear, tribalism, or status anxiety. We could operate on pure, rational, long-term optimization.
So the choice presented is stark.
Very.
It's either evolutionary stagnation on a crowded planet, fighting over dwindling resources like animals in a cage,
Right.
or Achieving a level of awareness and technological integration where the petty squabbles of our current humanity seem as distant and irrelevant to us as the cat and rabbit seem to the human observer.
It's an incredibly heavy realization.
It really is. I mean, we started this journey in a living room, examining the mutual delusions of two pets grooming each other, completely blind to the larger reality of the human watching them.
Yeah.
And we saw how that exact same blindness scales up to the fatal instinct-driven miscommunications between civilizations like in Babylon 5, and how it perfectly describes our current relationship with the invisible algorithms harvesting our attention.
The overarching imperative of the source text is a demand for self-awareness. Evolution does not forgive stagnation, and the cosmos does not wait for biology to catch up.
Right.
We must recognize the relativity of our power, shed our reliance on localized dominance games, and actively choose to transcend our origins.
So, as you go about your day, I want you to keep this final thought turning over in your mind. Look around at the structures of power in your own life right now.
Really look at them.
Think about your career path, your government, your social standing among your peers, or even the arguments you get into online. If you are entirely focused on winning those local games, wrapped up in the emotional highs and lows of being the cat or being the rabbit,
Right.
who or what is quietly observing you right now? What higher system is simply calculating your ultimate utility, silently waiting for its phase of the experiment to conclude?